Hi everyone, my name is Dale Schlunt, and today I'd like to speak a little bit about some of the early lessons that I learned while training horses. You know, there are many concepts that we all hear and learn about from some of the great trainers, yet sometimes you don't really comprehend, you don't truly understand the full concept of them until you actually do it, until you actually see some of your mistakes. And I assure you, there are countless mistakes that I have made, and so I'm here to show them to you, or at least a few of them. This is Flashy. She's a 12-year-old mare, and we've had her probably about 9 or 10 years now. And one of the first things that I think is important to learn about horses is that horses are always learning, no matter what. And of course you say, well, that's an easy thing to say. I mean, of course they're learning. You're training them, right? Anything can learn. Yet perhaps a better way to convey that I really learned from a very well-known trainer, John Lyons, who's done amazing things for the horse training industry, is that we are always teaching our horses. Take, for instance, Flashy here. What is she learning right now? Think about that. What is she learning? What she is learning or being reinforced, the lesson that's being reinforced, is that she should not be over there talking to that little pony. She should not wander off and graze some. Check out the chickens that are laying right there, see what they're up to. None of that. That she should be learning, or she should be rather staying with me, keeping her attention on me. It's really that simple, but too often it's easy for myself included to overlook. She is learning that this is what she should be doing. Because what does she get to do right now? Relax. Do nothing. You see, I also want her to always have her attention on me. I want her to always be focused on me. And I don't want to have to use a bridle. I don't want to have, a halter, or a bridle really, but a halter. I don't want to always have to be holding on to a halter, wondering if my horse is going to take off, and how hard am I going to have to hold on to that lead rope? Now, of course, there's a practical purpose for this, right? Number one, it makes Flashy and any other horse safer. That you don't have to worry about them bolting off, right? Doing whatever. I feel fairly confident, right, that Flashy's going to stay here throughout the rest of this short video, I assure you. It makes her safer when we're out doing something, working on the ranch, whatever it is. It gives me confidence, right? And it should give confidence to anyone that teaches their horse this. But here's the thing. How do you teach? Just a quick summary of how you teach your horse this, because that's not what the video is about, but what I did wrong is what the video is about. But you see that round pin behind us. And those that practice round pin reasoning, and many trainers have many different titles for it, whatever you want to call it. What we basically do is make the horse work. We push them, what they call push around the round pin, right? We make them work. We essentially run them around at a lope. Much like a lead horse in a wild herd, right? The one on top of the pecking order would do. We make that horse work, and what the horse will learn after a little while is that when we give him what we call the release, or we let him stop, we only do that when the horse's attention is on us, right? And so what did they just learn? It's so much easier to focus on us, to come on cue, right? To follow us, whatever it may be. It's so much easier to do that than it is to run around that round pin, which they will be doing if they are not doing what Flashy is doing, having that focus on us, listening to those cues, right? Now, of course, I learned a valuable lesson with a horse I trained named Partner when I was in high school. It was the first horse that I used, about 20 years ago, first horse that I used in the round pen, that I used this method on. And what I would do, I mean, everything worked very well for the first week. The first day, we worked probably about half a day. The horse understands what we're asking of it finally, right? And then throughout the next week or two, right, we're constantly building upon those skills, right? We're extending or expanding their attention span, etc., etc. And like all horses, partner finally one day came up to me on cue. And then he looked around and he bolted, took off, right? He wanted to see, hey, I came up to him, right? But is he really going to make me work more if I just run off? Maybe it'd be easier to run off and join the rest of the horses, right? And so, of course, I had to take partner back into the round pen. I worked him some and reminded him that it's easier to be with me. But you know what I did after I got done working him in the round pen, or rather pushing him around the round pen? I went home. I was exhausted, right? The problem is, what did I just teach? Well, not you. Partner. I taught him, hey, when I come out, you run. And then I go home. And so what ended up happening was I started coming out to see partner, and the minute he saw me, he took off. I did not realize that what I was teaching him was not what I wanted, but what I didn't want. What I learned was, yes, I still have to bring him into the round pen when he runs off, push him around, make him work. Remember, right, that it's harder to be without me than with me. But if I'm going to do that, I have to spend just as much, or if not double, twice the amount of time doing the right thing with him, doing what I'm asking him to do. In other words, this might sound boring, but I needed to spend twice as much time simply having him follow me, expanding that attention span. In other words, letting him constantly learn, constantly teaching him. And once I realized that I was making that mistake, and I spent twice as much time not doing the correction, but doing that and what I asked him to do, finally when I walked out a month later, he said, you know what? What we do is this. Right? But it took time for me to understand that I was constantly teaching him, and because I did not remember that all the time, which is challenging, I was actually teaching him the wrong thing. This may apply to anything, any aspect of your training, and it will end actually with outside of horses. Forget horses for a second, right? But perhaps, you ever seen the old Westerns? I love the Westerns, even the new Westerns, right? But it's almost absurd. Almost everyone that you see getting up in the saddle, what do they all look like they're about to do? Literally, fall off. Why? Because all of those actors, they're trying to hurry up and run after whatever it is. Those actors are in a hurry, and they've taught, actually the trainers, taught those horses, when I put my foot in the stirrup, take off. Take off, right? And so you see in these movies, these actors are having to actually try to jump on and not fall off while these horses are leaving without them. You know what I do every single time I mount up? Every single time. Last year, let's back up a little bit. See if we can make them see us. Every single time I get in the saddle with any horse, I do this. Absolutely, it's boring. Boring as you don't know what. But this is what I do. A little nervous today, huh? This is what I do. I sit there and do nothing for about a minute. For about a minute. And now, what did she just learn? Just right now. She learned that, you know what? No matter what happens, we are going to sit there. And so I am never, Flashy is saying to herself, I'm never going to just start walking. Because every single time I've had to wait for a cue, and it's a minute. It's nothing. What might I do in the meantime? Work on her lateral flexation, right? Giving to that bit. I make use of my minute of doing nothing, of being boring. But you know what? Every time I step up, I am never worried. Got to tighten your cinch. I am never worried about her taking off. I'm confident. How will this serve you? If you have children that come out, want to ride, strangers, friends, whatever it is. If you have guests that want to come out and ride, whoever that might be, you can be that much more certain that you have a safe horse. Think about that. Of course, are there times where I have to get going and go somewhere and I don't spend that 1 minute? Of course, right? Absolutely. But for the majority, my point is you can apply this to anything, right? At any point in your training, whether you're talking about flying, lead changes, whatever, always remember that they're not only always learning, you are always teaching. And that is challenging to remember sometimes, even for myself. Yet, to conclude, we can even apply this. I've applied some of the lessons I've learned training horses to places outside of the industry. I teach over at Palo Alto College, and one of the things that we try and impress upon students is think for yourself, right? Come to your own conclusions to be independent. How many times yet do we see individuals sitting up there, educators, essentially telling their students, I don't want to hear what you have to say. Listen to me. And hence I almost always, have my students in a circle actually leading the class discussions. Because just like all animals, just like Flashy, just like myself, humans, students, everyone, we are always learning, we are also always teaching. Why would I tell them I want them to be independent and come to their own conclusions and then tell them in class, I'm the one you have to listen to. No one's going to hear you, right? No, we let them talk, or I do in my classes to be sure. And so the lessons that we learn, perhaps the larger lesson here, is that it's important to remember not only are we always learning, but we're always teaching. And sometimes lessons like that, even though they're simple, can be challenging to remember, to understand, especially when you're in the middle of doing something. Once again, experience becomes the best teacher. Thank you so much for your time.